Shalom, Hebrews. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Alright, Hebrews, as I explained in other videos how we Israelites abandoned our heritage to some Babylonian scribes, some real serious scribes that control the whole commerce of Babylon. And these Babylonian scribes were powerful back in the BC days, and they were so powerful, man, that if they got a hold to your heritage, that, man, it's basically over. Your whole heritage, you're getting blotted out, guaranteed. And they got a hold to our heritage, and I want to try to uncover a little history that they'll never speak about. And the Hebrew community, man, we hurting for real serious scholars that can explain our heritage that's free of Jewish myths. And that's where the Israelite Brotherhood come in. We don't do Jewish myths. And I'm Israel ben Israel, the spokesperson, king for the Israelite Brotherhood. Okay, Hebrews, I want to show that this was left out in history, but it's plain to see if you just research around a little bit. They not gonna make the connections for you, but the connections are there for you to see. And I want to show how the Mishwish tribe, the Libyan Ma tribes, are the tribes that we Israelites intermingle with and had an association with. And those would be the tribes that we would go back into Africa to sojourn in the Sahara. And the history about the Sahara wasn't recorded by the Africans. Consequently, we, our ancestors, the Hebrew scribes that recorded our history in the promised land before we was driven out, they was put to death. The Babylonian king put the main ones to death. And man, we didn't record our history as being Israelites going into Africa because we had stopped doing that altogether and just embraced a total African Sahara Egyptian religion. And man, we did that, and we broke covenant, and the people that we did it with were the Libyans. Now, this is what our enemies will do. Our enemies will cover up any African history that they can, especially in northern and central Africa and the Sahara. They will cover it up with Berber history, and they do everything else with the history just like they do with the Israelite history. How they'll cover it up with Jewish history, or say the Jews did this. The same way with the Berbers. You got what they call a white Berber and so forth. But the Berber tribes come from the Berber tribes came from Syria. Over here, man, originally. Syria and Turkey originally, and they couldn't sail off into Egypt, so they sailed over here to the top parts of Libya, and then they hung out, in Libya and Tunisia and around these parts. Now, these parts around here, this is Japhet descendants and so forth, and we all know that they would try to get into Africa and be selling around, and how Greece and Italy is not a long distance from Africa. Those are coastal cities and so forth, and but how the Berbers originally come off a Amorite stock. So they could trace, if they give the Berbers the original history to the Israelites, then anything that could be traced to Israelites or look like it got a Hebrew origin, they cover it up with the Berber history. I'm talking about we dealing with some slick scribes, and it's one person that I was corresponding with, you know, on a social media site that said that our history is like is in a box, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and that's messed up. That is like that, but that's the truth, because our history fell into the hands of the Babylonian scribes, and the Babylonian scribes ain't no joke. If you study the history of Sipper in the Comorans, in the contracts in the Amorite administration period is basically what we have now and what we Israelites are governed by. But man, them people, if they got a hold to your heritage, that you can almost hang it up, because they got the ability to change everything around, and they professional with forging history and changing history around, and do it collectively in an organized fashion and so forth. Yes, our enemies been destroying Israelite history in an organized fashion, because man, these people, you know, got thousands of years of writing the history for Mesopotamia and so forth. They got thousands of years of writing history for Mesopotamia. I'm talking about the Sephardims from Cyprus. You know, they had thousands of years. They're called Sephardi Jews today, but they got thousands of years of writing history before we was even the Israelite nation, because they're Amorites, and everybody know that the Amorites founded Babylon. Well, okay. Well, these people got a hold to our heritage, and they had thousands of years of administrative structure in creating for all kind of governments and kings in Mesopotamia, and there's something serious with contracts, selling, and the whole capitalist system is developed by them. Well, our history fell into their hands, and they kind of like, man, controlled the Greek Empire and so forth, and man, they some slick people, man, but the main thing is that they know how to cover up Israelite history. You know, it's like, you know, they couldn't just follow us into Africa when we abandoned the covenant during the Babylonian wars, and that's what the book of Jeremiah explained. But, you know, around about Greek times, probably about a good 250 something years later, when they start coming into Africa in the Sahara with the Greeks looking for us Israelites that had abandoned the covenant. Because remember, when the Babylonians ran us into Africa by way of Egypt, that the Babylonians took Egypt over for 50 years to the Persians, you know, defeated the Babylonians and took Egypt back, you know, for the pigmented people and so forth. But how about that the Babylonians army was made up of Scythian, and that'd be Ashkenazi coming into the picture too. But we had ran into the interior of Africa. We was already hooked up with the Libyan tribes, you know, the Mishwish tribes, and this could be seen easily. And then this would explain how we Israelites got all those minerals and those stones that was needed for the breastplate, is that we had an African connection. And how about that all the stones in the breastplate that the Levites had were found in Africa? You know what I'm saying? Mostly in East Africa, close to Egypt, but you know, in Africa, in Central and West Africa, you know, all within reaching distance. And we know that the peoples, you know, been in these lands and parts for a long time, and then how that the borders of Africa that you have today come from the League of Nations. Meaning the League of Nations dividing Africa up. You know, the Europeans dividing Africa up. And, you know, I say that they were searching for any Hebrews that didn't get captured during the transatlantic slave trade, and that, you know, that they were searching, making sure there wasn't none left. But anyway, the League of Nations divided Africa up, and then, you know, them the borders that you get now, and then they also shuffle the people around. But, you know, the stones that was found in the breastplate, you know, all of them are found in Africa. All of them are found in Africa, you know, or real close by. That's like the sardis. I mean, the sardis is found in Africa. The topaz, the topaz is one of the breastplate stones. It's found in Zimbabwe. The carbuncle, the carbuncle stone is one of the stones that the Levites had. This one right here, and I'm gonna show some history that's startling, Hebrews, because this stone right here is what we mined and was looking for in Africa up under the name Garamantian, and we had traded this stone with the Romans and made them rich, and how we was looking for stones and had mining stones and can dig wells, and all the technology that we had in the promised land we took into Africa. And it should be a known fact that when we left Africa, left from northeast Egypt, northeast Africa, Egypt, going into the promised land, which is, you know, northeast Africa too, because it's on the African plateau. The promised land is how that we had stones and knowledge of stones and all these different stones. And what our enemy try to do is say that the Hebrews up on Exodus got them stones from some folks from India, and that the Egyptians gave their stones up freely and so forth, and that's false. And I want to show that when we left Egypt during Exodus time, that how the Mishwish tribes, the ones that left with us during Exodus time, and that how Joseph was married to the Mishwish tribe. The priest of On was from the Mishwish tribes, or they was from that stock, and they controlled Lower Egypt. And how about that Joseph had, you know, two sons by their kindred, you know, and that's the Manasseh and Ephraim. You know, Manasseh and Ephraim were of that stock, and then people would exodus with us when we exodus Egypt, the mixed multitude, because it was a Pharaoh that come on that didn't know Joseph, and that's gonna be the Pharaoh from Upper Egypt, and how the Egyptians from Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt had conflict all the time, and how that we Israelites would associate ourselves with the ones from Lower Egypt, and how that it was the Lower Egyptians that would trick us into Africa to do their religion. The Mishwish tribes doing the satire history of Egypt, and that would be Necho. This king right here, he gonna be a Mishwish tribe king. You know, that's gonna be a Mishwish tribe king, and that's gonna be the king that killed King Josiah after he killed cleaned the Egyptian worship up, and then that's gonna be the obelisk that's in Central Park that we was enslaved under in Egypt. You know, and then that's in New York, in Central Park. They brought it here. Prophet Moses probably would have touched that, and we most certainly would have seen it in Egypt, because we was in bondage in Egypt when that obelisk was, you know, constructed. And that's a statue of Necho. Necho was going to be a satire king, a Mishwish king, and them he would kill King Josiah after he cleaned the Egyptian worship up, after we had been on it for 300 years. And then I want to show something, that how we was on it for 300 years, that how Solomon had to be married to one of these Mishwish Pharaoh's daughters. You know what I'm saying? Oshkron and those type. You know, let me show some of this, and then I'm gonna show how that we Israelites were called the Garamantians, which was a derogatory name that the Greeks called the people, and then how did they never try to explain what the people call themselves. And that's mysterious right there, that they don't want to say what the people call themselves. And then how did they give the Garamantian history to the Barbers, the people that's kindred to the Amorite tribes from Syria that had settled into northern Libya and so forth. Alright, let's look at some of this here, and let's see what's going on. Let's see what's going on. Alright, first, let's see about Solomon in the Mishwish tribes. Let's see how he will be connected. See, look, this probably gonna be and that's probably why the statue was tore up. This guy, Persusanines, how they got his statue tore up, you know, and all the statues that's tore up with their heads knocked off and lips and arms missing. Them statues gonna be connected to probably to the people from Lower Egypt, and them gonna be the ones that the Babylonian scribes hate the most, and went thoroughly to cover up their history, because Lower Egypt history mean they done almost just about blotted it out. And that's where we Hebrews hung out with the people from Lower Egypt, and how that the Babylonian scribes, when they got into Egypt, man, they would do a thorough job on destroying the history. You know what I'm saying? That's like they got this Israelite Stella, the Memphite Stella, something like that. But how it was a connection between the Mishwish tribes, the Libyan tribes, and how they try to say that we Israelites was associated with it some type of way, you know. But like I say, that the Egyptian history is covered up. You know, this dude right here, they gonna cover his, you know, they gonna break his head off and everything, because, you know, 9 out of 10, if they breaking his head off and deforming him and defacing his stature, that is gonna be connected to some Hebrew history some kind of way. All right, if you see how this guy here ring, you know what I'm saying, from 967 to 943, this probably gonna be the guy that Solomon married his daughter. Now, it was about 2 pharaohs on doing Solomon time. It was really about 3 pharaohs on doing Solomon time, doing the Ring of Solomon. But 9 out of 10, this gonna be the guy, the pharaoh right here from the Mishwish tribes, that Solomon would be married to his daughter and so forth. And look, and we can see when Solomon was on the throne. You know, Solomon was on the throne. You know, Solomon reigned from 971 to 931 BC. So we know that this guy right here, you know, we can look at his father, you know, his predecessor. And you know, Solomon could have been married, you know what I'm saying, during his time. You know, Solomon could have been married during his time. And how this guy right here, you know, Solomon could have been married during his time. All these Libyan Mishwish pharaohs, and these would be the pharaohs that was real heavy into that Amen Ra Ptah religion that we Israelites broke the covenant with during the Babylonian wars, when we ran into Africa when we told the prophet Jeremiah that, we did better when we was worshiping Egyptian religion. You see, so this these are the Nubian, these are the Nubian uh, uh, pharaohs, from the 21st dynasty. But this is what they don't say, is that the Satai kings that Nietzsche and them are Libyan kings too, and how that we would run into Africa fooling with them and wouldn't be seen no more, and how that them folks is gonna be where we got the stones and so forth from all over Africa for the breastplates, because we had an association with them. And also Joseph was married to married into their tribe, because the priest of On, it is a satire, a Swiss priest, and many priests, many is connected to the Libyan pharaohs and so forth. And then how Joseph would be given one of, his daughter by Pharaoh. All right. And Pharaoh called Joseph name Zephaniah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out all over the land of Egypt. All right. And then unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, born to him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for Yah, he had made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. In the name of the second called he Ephraim, for Yah had caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Because they did Joseph real bad. And like I got stated in other videos, that probably soon as Pharaoh peeped that Joseph was connected to the Most High, and that we Israelites was in the promised land, because Joseph, eventually brung his, father there. But how him being a Hebrew, that Pharaoh would have known about Prophet Abraham, coming to Egypt and so forth, and how the Creator was, connected to him. And Pharaoh probably would have been real attentive to all the happenings in the land of Canaan, being that Pharaoh and them did trade and had a history of doing trade with Mesopotamia and so forth. So he would have known, about Joseph, especially after he done answered his prayers and so forth, and the ones he was troubled by, and then Joseph answered them. Man, Pharaoh gonna hurry up and do something slick, and he did something slick by giving him Asenath, because out of that union, Manasseh and Ephraim was born. In the tribe of Ephraim, descendants can be shown throughout Tanakh history as associating with the Egyptians. Jeroboam brung 2 Egyptian institutions out on us and set in the northern kingdom, Bethel and Dan, and how that would cause us to break the covenant, after even after King Josiah cleaned it up, we would still, break the covenant and so forth. And look here, Hebrews, we broke the covenant to go back into Africa to be reunited with them Libyan folks. And look, I want to make this connection real quick too, about how now, like I say, Hebrews, that our enemies ain't gonna never tell the truth. They ain't gonna never tell the truth. And if you're looking for your enemies to tell the truth, or to even document our history, you can hang it up. And we know the Africans ain't documented our history, so this is something we Hebrew Israelites got to put together ourselves. We got to put our history together ourselves. And then this is what I discovered, Hebrews. I've been telling y'all for the longest that our first derogatory name was called Garamantian. And I'm going to read a little history about the Garamantians. But look, check this out now. Now this is common sense. This is common sense, Hebrews, that we know that if one of the slaves, that they captured in Africa and that they brung here in the Americas, and they ain't gonna just bring one of them, that they gonna bring a bunch of them. Probably his whole tribe in the area he was in, that he was captured, and that they called this slave a Garamantian. They know now they gonna try to cover it up. That's like now. You know, they've been trying to cover up the Garamantian history and trying to extend their stay into Africa longer than they actually was. But the thing is that we associated with the Libyan tribes from the beginning, and they was always from Libya and so forth, from the west side of the Nile is what I call, you know what I'm saying, that they basically made up what's called West Africa, and that's where the technology and the civilization was, you know, and the Africans were fighting the ones, the Ethiopian, Sudan, Ethiopia, what I call the troglodyte Nephilim stock, controlled the east side of the Nile, and so forth, and how the west side of the Nile was controlled by the West Africans, who was represented by the Libyans, and how did they control Lower Egypt, and then how we associated with them, and then how we would go into Africa, you know, meant to be reunited with them, and then how our enemies ain't gonna record none of that history, that's not recorded, and then how that they gonna try to get rid of any evidence that show a connection to the Israelites that went into Africa. Like I got on the video, the quietest kept history is how that the Israelites ran into Africa, and how nobody document whatever happened to them, and how the Tanakh is the only book, and how did the European Western scholars overlooked it and they never discussed it, and how did those Hebrews that ran into Africa are us, people from the transatlantic slave trade, and our first derogatory name was Garamantian. And then look, I'm gonna show you how our enemies is real slick, and how you can't trust them, as well as you can't trust Hebrews that's using Jewish myths. Look, how about that one of the slaves, now like I say, it's gonna be more than one, but how they, you know, had this brother that's supposed to had cured the colonists of smallpox and so forth, and then how did, you know, he was called a Garamantian. Now, you know, if they got one, that is gonna be a whole bunch of them. It's gonna be a whole bunch of us, because what happened is that after the Garamantian Empire water dried up, that everybody started moving around. We broke up and started moving around and started having conflict with the other Africans, men around about these parts. Man, we started having conflict with them, you know, after the water dried up where we were, because we used to go get the Ethiopians, capture them, and then that's one of the reasons why the Ethiopians wasn't enslaved, and how that the Ethiopians were given some of the Israelites' history is because when we was in Africa, you know, if an Ethiopian say, oh, we ain't never been enslaved, and we ain't never been enslaved, and they'll do that real quick, and then look cross-eyed at you, you know, but because we here in bondage and our people all messed up. But I let them know that we enslaved them under the name Garamantian, and how we used to go capture them on chariots and ride down into their little holdings when they was in them caves, and flush them out, and then take them and make them dig tunnels, water tunnels, foggers, and so forth, and how we knew how to dig for water from living in the promised land, and how that was a trait of the Garamantians, as well as a whole bunch of traits that we had in the promised land. And then look here, Hebrews, it's this African, so-called African, that was a Garamantian, really a Hebrew Israelite, that taught these folks how to fight smallpox, and he was captured. Look, in April, a smallpox swept, when a smallpox outbreak swept through Boston. This was the latest in a string of 6 epidemics that had since 1630. Now, you know what I'm saying? He fresh over here. Laid waste to the city. Cotton Mather, a local slave owner and preacher, claimed to be in possession of a way of preventing contracting the disease. Mather, who had first come to public prominence as one of the thinkers behind the Salem witch trials, had gotten the method from one of his former slaves. Now, check this out. 15 years earlier, Mather's congregation had purchased for him a African slave, a young man. And as I showed you that all Africans wasn't taken to slavery. You ain't have no Tutsis, you ain't have no Pygmies, you ain't have no Berbers, you ain't have no Egyptians. Man, a whole bunch of Africans wasn't taken to slavery, and how did they just focus on a certain group of people and how they been lying about it. And that's why come we don't have no connections to the Africans right now, and they don't, and there's no solidarity. Now, the way that we've been being abused over here, and you can see on media, and they've been knowing that we've been over here in slavery up under some beasts, that they would have tried to make some type of connections if we had a connection to them. But, you know, we don't. And some Hebrews are living in delusion, man, about that. But look, all right, the Negro, a young man who is a Negro, now this Mather's congregation had purchased for him African slave, a young man who is a Negro, look, giving him that derogatory name. That lets you know how he was a Hebrew of a promising aspect and temper. He was humble. Mather named him one Simus, after a slave in the Bible whose name meant useful. That's messed up. Mathers described them folks be knowing we Israelites. Mathers described womaness as being Garamantians. Look, as being Garamantians. But it's unclear whether ethnic group exactly he refers to suggest him to be a Garamantes. You know what I'm saying? He was a Garamantian. Look, who corresponded. They try to switch it off to the Barbers and stuff, who people was from southern Libya. You know what I'm saying? But they called him a Garamantian. And then this Negro slave who they call a Garamantian. Now check this out, Hebrews. The Garamantians. Now let's look at some of their history. Now they've been trying to, since lately it seemed like since the Israelite Brotherhood get on some history and start explaining that, man, they'll come back and try to change some stuff around a little bit. And I promise you they've been doing that with the Jewish history, how they've been trying to distance themselves from Babylon. You know, man, it's hard to go find some history showing that the Jews, the Sephardims, were scribes in Babylon. You know, that information is disappearing. But look, the name Garamantian, the name Garamantes is a Greek name. Now check this out. The Greeks and the Romans hated these people in Africa more than any other African or any other people. And then so, you know, if the Greeks hated them and hated them with a passion, and then they'll do trade with them and try to, you know, jip them out of stuff. But how they hated these folks, and they were scared of them too. They were scared of the Garamantians. The Roman Empire, in the Greeks and the Romans were scared of the Garamantians. Guess why? Because we were those Israelites that had left the promised land. Now, we wasn't no pushover. Now, if they came in fiddle faddling like they did, then, you know, we're going to beat them down and whoop on them. But if they came in like the Scythians did on the horseback, you know, chasing us into Africa, then that's a whole nother different thing. And plus, the Creator had said that the Chaldeans was going to whoop us and chase us off the land, even if they had broken arms and legs, that they was going to get us up off the land. So, you know, we was going to be driven off the promised land because we was worshiping the Egyptian religion. So we wouldn't have no power, boy. But once we got inside Africa and got chased about the promised land, and we wasn't playing. We wasn't playing at all. So, you know, the first derogatory name that we going to get It is from the Greeks, calling the people the Garamantians, but they say that they ain't never just, identified their own selves. What it is that we had Hebrew names and they didn't just want to publish that, because that's like this language, this language called Tef. It's this language called Tef. Let me find it. It's this language called Tef. This script, the Tefni. Tefni is a script, a language that they try to say that the barbers spoke, and it's supposed to be Afro-Asiatic. Now, when they call and say it's Afro-Asiatic, meaning that they can speak Hebrew and Arabic and so forth, and then how that they'll try to cover up the Israelites' language and try to say that it was the barbers in there speaking that, Libico Barber, but the name of the language is called Tefni, and that language, can be spoken. They try to say where the Phoenicians gave it to them, and we know the Phoenicians sailed all around the Mediterranean. And now this language is supposed to go all around the Mediterranean, can be spoken all around the Mediterranean, even the Promised Land, and how the Phoenicians had it over here in Syria, and how they went, around here and stuff, and did trade all around in these parts. But anyway, we were speaking this Egyptian, Hebrew, Phoenician language. It's like a few languages combined, and we spoke it, and it would make sense that the Hebrews would kind of be, that's like the Hebrew that we spoke, me and the priests wrote it, and that we was mostly speaking Egyptian like languages, and how we could communicate with the Egyptians and so forth, especially after being there for all that time that we was there for the 400 years. But look, they'll try to cover the Garamantian history up with the Berbers and so forth. All right, the name Garamantian is a Greek name. It was first mentioned by Herodotus, but although the Greek coined the term for people living in southern Libya in what is now the country of Niger. See, they called us niggers in Niger, and that's where they say that we was from. We cannot be certain of what the Garamantians actually call themselves. Scholars have been searching to uncover. They full of crap. Them folks don't have some Hebrew names, and they already writing in Hebrew in the Egyptian script. And so, them folks ain't gonna want to publicize that and so forth. All right, now let me read something else about the Garamantians that should let Hebrews know. You know what I'm saying? That they gonna try to say that it's two type of blacks. The troglodyte Ethiopian, and then the another kind of the Garamantian type Ethiopian. What they classified as two different black people. Like now, you can see how we kind of look, and then you can get them Hamites, and man, you can kind of almost point them out, that they'll be a little different from us. Well, that was the classification in Africa when we was there, how they try to classify two different Africans and stuff, two different group of pigmented peoples, and one was the troglodyte Ethiopians, and then the other ones they just called the Garamantians. One Ethiopian comprising from such and such and such. Yeah. All right. The Garamantians were an empire, and very advanced one at that. And then this is back in 600 BC, and like I say, we could have been in Africa, like we was already doing trade in Africa, because Ephraim used to take oil into Egypt, so it wouldn't be nothing. And plus we had all them stones come from Africa. You know, I just read where all the stones come from, how the oxen come from the Atlas Mountain, the Lennox come from Botswana, the agate come from Botswana, the emeralds come from uh, Zambia, jasper found all over, you know what I'm saying, Africa. The braille is from Mozambique. The diamonds is all in West Africa and so forth. And the sapphire that we had in the breastplate comes from Mozambique and Tanzania. You know, the amethyst, you know, all those stones in the breastplate come from Africa, in the interior of Africa. Every last one of them. And how we wouldn't have went to India or some other place to get some stones that you can get in Africa, and how that we was connected to the Libyan tribes who would have helped us with the stones. And then how about that the Garamantians sold the cubicle, this stone right here, that was the Levite stone. This was the Levite stone. And then how did we made the Roman Empire rich by selling them that? So it would take some experienced people that know how to mine and know what the stones look like, and especially all those different stones and so forth. You know what I'm saying? It would have took some knowledge of that. And the Bible showed that we had that knowledge. And especially putting some stones in a gold breastplate and then writing our name up on the stones. And then you can't get no colder than that. And then we learned all this, you know, from being in Africa. But look, let's check this out, man, about the Garamantians. So we know that, you know, our enemies ain't gonna tell us no truth, and we know ain't no Israelite organization that's using Jewish myths gonna tell the truth. Look, the Garamantes were an empire and very advanced one. The ancient Romans slandered their name, calling them barbarians, when all the while knowing they were one of the most powerful confederation of tribes in the Sahara. Contrary to Roman texts about this civilization, archaeological has altered this perception of the level of technical sophistication of the Garamantians. Some inhabitants of the Garamantians were skillful agriculturalists living in villages. These villages sparsely populated the landscape. The Garamantian civilization was also skilled and equipped in technology such as metallurgy. See, look, making glass making. That's why come I be explaining to them Israelites, talking about that we went to the Americas during Assyrian time, that they got to be crazy, because all this is part of our culture, the culture that we had in the promised land, that we would have took that with them as we did in Africa, as you can see right here. Look, all right. Remember, the Garamantians were skillful in agriculturists living in villages. These villages sparsely populated the landscape. The Garamantian civilization was also skilled and equipped in technologies such as metallurgy, glass making, salt refining, and production of precious stones. Look, the production of precious stones. See, that's them stones that I just read about that was in the breastplate. Look, check this out, Hebrews. Our enemies been dogging us out, telling us lies. Man, they been lying to us big time. Check this out. I'm going to show you something. Man, if I can get it, pull it up. Man, that's awful. Got to be somewhere over here. Oh, them devils do me so bad. They must have done deleted it. But I had some stones. Breastplate stones. Where in the world did they go? Man, I had the breastplate stones up here. The 12 breastplate stones in the, here they go. Alright, we still got them. Look, you see them stones right there? All them stones found in Africa. All them stones found in Africa. And all them stones we would have had to get in Africa, being that we was right there And them stones made up the breastplate, and all them stones can be found in Africa. And then that's what the Garamantians was mining stones and so forth. A custom that you just don't just pop up out of nowhere. It have to be a history of a development of those skills and technology. And then all of a sudden they just pop up in the Sahara doing that. Those was the Hebrews that fled the promised land. These Hebrews right here. This was us right here. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Man, this thing is so slow. Alright. Yeah, well, this is us right here. I can show it to you in the Tanakh real easy. Alright, you go to 2 Kings. Alright, here it is. 2 Kings chapter 25, verse 26. And all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies, arose and came to Egypt, for they was afraid of the Chaldeans. We was afraid of Ashkenaz. They said those Hebrews that went into Africa right there never made it back to the promised land. Never made it back to the promised land. And when they went into Africa, when our ancestors went into Africa during the Babylonian wars, driven off the land for saying that we were going to worship the Egyptian religion, we never came back to the promised land. And how that, man, it could have been some thru Assyrians with us. The Egyptians was with us, because let me show you why the Egyptians was with us. Because if you go to the man, look at the maps and the stones we had, in Africa. And look, man, you can read that, you know what I'm saying, all the different stones that's in the Bible, and then they explain and give you their names. All of them was found in Africa. Alright, if we can, man, let's see what it said. Alright, look right here. Look, you see those pyramids? Those are the pyramids that was in Libya, in lower Libya. That when we Hebrews be saying, we build the pyramids, we build some pyramids, we actually did build the pyramids under the name Garamantian. Look, see, look. Man, our enemies ruthless. They ain't gonna tell us, man, our real history. And then that's the Garamantian civilization will be the same as in Egypt. And the same as in the promised land, our housing and how we lived and stuff the same. And this is where the Garamantians stayed. Look, those are the pyramids they built. Those are the pyramids we built. Those are the pyramids. Those are some baby pyramids. They baby pyramids. But nevertheless, we built them in Africa when we went into Africa under the name Garamantian. And our first derogatory name. Like I say, the folks say that the people, you know, they don't know what they call themselves. You know what I'm saying? That's a lie. That, you know, the folks know what they call themselves and so forth, and that how that they just didn't want to record them Hebrew names and so forth. But this is where the Garamantians stay. That's their houses and so forth. All right, let me get back to reading some of this stuff. All right, the Garamantian Empire, you know, they was advanced, real advanced, and the Romans slandered their name, calling them barbarians. You know, them gonna be the Israelites. You know, they ain't calling the Berbers that, and that's where the name's supposed to originate amongst them. You see, when all the while knowing, you see, they were one of the most powerful confederation of tribes in the Sahara, contrary to Roman texts about this civilization. Archaeological has altered the perception of the level of technological sophistication of the Garamantians. Some inhabitants of Garamantian were skillful agriculturists living in villages. These villages sparsely populated the landscape. The Garamantian civilization was also skilled and equipped in technology such as metallurgy, meaning smelting metals and stuff, making glass, salt refining, production of precious stones. Look, the production of precious stones. The society had a written indigenous script called Tignan, and that's that language that's spoken in the Mediterranean, slick Hebrew and Egyptian languages and so forth, probably through more combined with the peoples that we, was associating with. All right, supplementary discoveries have been recently, such as textiles for leather, according to the most interesting technological attribute of the Garamantians were their capabilities of harnessing water in the desert through the foggers. The foggers were also utilized to irrigate farms where it was climatically feasible to irrigate work. The foggers were a 3,000-mile network of underground irrigation channels. The soil of the basin consisted of black, shining sandstone, according to Penny. There was also an area called the Black Mountains, either because it was scorched with fire or was blackened from the heat from the sun. These unbearable heat played a very pivotal role in giving the Garamantian Empire an upper hand. Romans were very cautious to invade the Garamantian country due to the underlying treacherous desert temperature. The Garamantians were very statues of this. These villages and towns were located deep in the desert or in very remote areas that were impervious to raiding and vulnerability. That's because we had left the promised land, chased and ran out of Egypt by the Chaldeans and the other people from Asia and from the European, and around the Black Sea and so forth. All them folks and then chased us into Africa by way of Egypt. So, we're going to get somewhere that's going to be inaccessible to them, and we're going to be looking out real, smart on not just, having them folks falling up on us. And, so that makes sense. And that's probably why they would be like that. Why would some Africans be living like that? And there's no known enemies and stuff. And how that the enemies were the foreigners, the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans and so forth. All right, this is a story. All right, let me see. The Romans were very eager to capture the Garamantians, since they often attacked the Roman shore and pillaged and plundered the Roman province of Africa, Mauritania, Tripolitania, and other Roman provinces in the interior. Yeah, so the Garamantians was robbing and, doing all that stuff to the Romans. So, yeah, the Romans ain't gonna like that. The Romans ain't gonna like that. But the Garamantian Empire would break up. The Garamantian Empire would break up. And that's because the water dried up from them. And the water dried up, and that would make the empire, the people break up and start running around looking for water. And we would have conflict with the Chad groups and so forth, the Chad and all the other Africans, and then that's how we were sold. But now our enemies are trying to give us to the nations and the peoples that sold us, because it's like West Africa should have been empty. It shouldn't have been nobody in West Africa, knowing that the enemies had they dungeons and castles to transport the Hebrews and other imaginary Africans to far off lands into slavery and stuff. But how did these Africans ain't never left West Africa and been there? And then how did now the people trying to say, oh, we connected to them and so forth, and how did that's false history, and how did our enemies will do anything and will connect us to anybody than to be connecting us to an Israelite history. You ain't never heard our enemies one time. You ain't never heard our enemies not one time say that we the Hebrew Israelites and how that, we're connected to them. Not one time in our captivity have our enemies ever said that we was connected to the Israelites, or even that we should worship the creator that Moses, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob worshiped. They ain't never told us that in our captivity. That should be, setting some bells off right there. And that how our enemies give us Jesus, and the New Testament and all the other things that not in the Tanakh and don't support an Israelite heritage. All right, shalom, Hebrews. I just want to show that information that how that we Israelites, you know what I'm saying, that's like doing the satire history, you know, the satire king, uh, uh, the satire kings were kings from lower lower Libya, from Egypt, and then them gonna be the ones that, you know, that drove us into Africa with them when we broke covenant. You see, the lower Egyptians were ruled by the Libyan Mishwish tribes, and Necho gonna be one. Necho gonna be a Libyan king that was set up by the Assyrians. Now the Assyrians were associated with them, and then they used to help the Assyrians just before Nineveh failed. You know, them them Egyptians were in Nineveh, and they would go try to help the Assyrians in their last days, and then that's why Necho tried to come across the promised land after King Josiah just cleaned it up. And then they would kill King Josiah and put us Israelites on the Egyptian religion, and then we would go into Africa and hang out with the Libyan tribes, and we would be called Garamantians. And then, you know, here we are, here in slavery, and then that's what happened to us. And there's some more history that's gonna go with this, but I'm just throwing this out here because it's easy to be seen. And then, you know, you can look in the scriptures and see that, you know, the stones and so forth that, you know, we had, and then you can look and type in each one of them. This the thing, they ain't gonna tell you that they all come from Africa. You got to look them up individually. It's like they know that, you know, one day that we was gonna be searching for this. All right, shalom, Hebrews. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. And you know, our first derogatory name was Garamantian, and how that, you know, that, man, we got to put our history together ourselves because we can't depend on our enemies to do it. Shalom.